So this logic of domination idea continued here. Um, there's a tendency when we use this logic to separate the world into antagonistic pairs. This is the legacy of the Western us versus them logic. It's always us versus them. We construct the other in opposition to us. Ultimately, if it's social groups, we dehumanize the other and then dominate them. In reference to the earth, we humanized it and then dominated it. We turned it into a female and then dominated it. Of course, there's a problem of material outcomes. This dominated and naturalized other ultimately does not receive fair environmental treatment. I mean, it's just the result of domination. Advantaged versus disadvantaged, dominant versus minority. The dominant gets the majority of the spoils, and the minority or the disadvantaged get little. Returning back to these gender differences and ultimately how they relate to the experiences of nature. The dualism of patriarchal reasoning ultimately also affects the way women and men experience the environment itself. Men, if asked, describe natural experiences using significantly more aggressive, militaristic, and violent imagery. You can see the man out there hunting and carving up that deer, living off the land in a very violent us versus them approach. Women, on the other hand, emphasize more domestic environmental visions, which were based on experiencing of nature through a nurturing perspective. Is this a result of socialization and gender roles over time? Probably. Yet even environmental activists, when we were referring back to this environmentalism and feminism, often associate nature with women. So even the ecofeminists see Gaia, Mother Earth. And ultimately, this idea is to promote positive valuation of both nature and therefore women. So if Mother Nature is being dominated and there are material outcomes to that domination, and they're creating dire and negative consequences for humanity, well, then if we construct Mother Nature, if we construct Mother Earth as needing to not be dominated, then maybe in turn we won't dominate women as well. But ecofeminists argue that this is problematic as well. They don't want to further stereotypes of women as caretakers of everyone else. I mean, ultimately, the point of ecofeminism is not to blame men for environmental problems. It's more concerned about the patriarchal system of social organization, which has been enacted by both men and women, but ultimately results in the domination of women. Therefore, women have to be active agents in the domination of nature for this to allow to happen. There, as you can imagine, within a theoretical perspective, especially one challenging the dominant social order of patriarchy, there's going to be some controversies over ecofeminism. Some early ecofeminists argue women and their associations with nature should be celebrated. But they were ultimately criticized for perpetuating this dichotomy between men and women, which in turn created negative stereotypes of women. They also noticed that reification can be alienating and fatalistic, which implies this biological difference between men and women. And it's those biological differences that are at the root of patriarchy. And it's also criticized for implying that the logic of domination is mainly a feature of Western thought. Much to its credit, ecofeminism is trying to adapt, and we're seeing some alternatives starting to surface. New terms emerging to address the criticisms and recognize those gray areas where things interact and where they're interdependent. Environmental feminism, ecological feminism, eco-gender studies. These categories are not inherently wrong or bad. They just need better ones than the hierarchical, socially unjust, and environmentally destructive ones of patriarchy. Whatever the category is, they're trying to deconstruct patriarchy in a way that allows for systems of thought that empower everyone, not just men. And we want to keep in mind that ideology can make a difference. Social inequality is not just a result of materialism. It's also a result of ideology. The transformation of the environment was going on way before capitalism arrived in the East or the West. So ideology, not economy, or at least not capitalism, is responsible for much of the domination we see today. And maybe capitalism itself is an economic transformation in response to the ideology. So in the end, we don't fully understand the ideological origins of the transformation and domination of the earth, but we're figuring it out. And we're figuring out that we're the ones that are responsible for doing it. And ultimately, if we're going to change the world, it's going to be us that's doing the changing.